Welcome to the Clique podcast. I'm Dani, a mindset and manifestation expert and founder of the Clique, a company that helps women overcome their fears and limiting beliefs to create a life and business that they love. Within this podcast, I will help you get clear on what you want, identify the blocks that are holding you back, transform your mindset and raise your vibration so that you can co-create magic with the universe. If you are looking to design a life that truly sets your soul on fire and manifest more success and abundance, then you are in the right place. Hello ladies, how are we all? So I'm really excited to record this episode with you because it was something that was suggested to me by somebody on Instagram. Somebody reached out and asked if I could create a podcast on this particular topic. So I'm hoping that this will benefit a lot of you. And the topic I want to discuss today is what to do when you are surrounded by negativity. And how do you really sort of protect yourself, protect your energy? How do you keep yourself positive when you've got lots of negative energy around you? And this is definitely something that I resonated with because when I first stepped into this world and started to really do the work on my mindset, I became very protective of my mindset and of my energy. You know, I was putting a lot of work in to kind of really change my mindset and to raise my vibration. And I didn't want my energy to be affected by negative energy that was kind of outside of me. So negative energy, it can show up in our lives in many different ways. It might be in the form of negative people. So it might be people that you've got in your life that just seem to complain all the time. They are, they're constantly in that victim mode. Perhaps they like to gossip or bitch or moan about things. So negative people is one thing, but it could also be your environment that's negative. Maybe you're in sort of perhaps a workplace that is pretty toxic. And, the people within that workplace are quite negative, but maybe the working environment itself, maybe there's a lot of stress, maybe there's a lot of pressure. It might be that the workspace, so that the office in which you do your work doesn't necessarily feel high vibe to you. So there's lots of different ways that negative energy can infiltrate into our lives. And it's really important that we protect ourselves from this because energy is contagious. Okay, and when we are around negative energy, it can have a negative impact on our own vibrational frequency. And remember that your energy is so important when it comes to manifesting. We manifest based upon our vibrational frequency. We are a magnet to the things that we're a vibrational match to. And so if your energy is lowered, if your frequency is lowered because you are surrounded by negative energy, that's going to have a ripple effect in terms of your manifestations. You're going to start to see more negative things show up into your life. And so, just being really mindful of the things that are around you that perhaps are a little bit more negative and, making sure you protect yourself from those things. So where do we start with this? How do we protect ourselves? So I want to just share actually some of the things that really helped me, especially in those early days, but even today, some of the things that I still do to really, protect my energy. Now, talking about people, this is always a bit of a funny topic because we often have negative people in our lives or people that perhaps like to complain about things. But at the end of the day, they're our friends, they're our family members, they're our loved ones. We care about them and we want to be able to support them. We want to be there for them. And so I found it really tricky trying to balance protecting my energy, but at the same time being available for when people really, really needed me. And I think there is a difference between somebody genuinely, having something going on in their life and looking for advice, looking for guidance, looking for that support and wanting to actually make changes in their life versus somebody that is just stuck in that complaining mode, stuck in that victim mentality and is almost hooked upon being negative. Okay, there is a difference between the two. There is a difference between people who want to make changes and who are looking for your support versus somebody who actually don't really want that support. They just want the opportunity to complain about things. Because here's the thing, often we think of negative energy as this horrible thing that we want to escape from, but it can also be addictive as well. Complaining about life can be addictive. Bitching, gossiping can be addictive. You know, if you think about it, how often do people find themselves loving complaining about things, loving to have a good moan? We do so sometimes because actually it can feel good. Complaining about things almost gives us this, it can almost kind of fuel us in some ways. And so we often have people in our lives that are hooked on just this complaining mentality where they just love to have a good moan. And it's not because they want you to help them. It's just because complaining or, bitching about things actually feels quite good to them. Okay, now this is in comparison to somebody who has got something going on in their life and they are genuinely looking for that support. They are looking for your guidance, your wisdom, or, for you to just be there and be a friend to them, be a loved one to them. And this is where, being around, there's a difference between giving your energy to somebody who just wants to complain about things and actually showing up for the people who really need you. Because if you are surrounding yourself with somebody or with people that just want to complain for the sake of it, they just want to have a good moan for the sake of having a good moan, that is going to negatively affect your energy because it's never going to feel like you are able to make a difference. Now, maybe you've experienced this before where no matter what you say to somebody, they never want to make changes. They never want to see, possibilities. They always want to see problems rather than solutions. And maybe it's, you've tried to give them guidance in the past before. Maybe you've tried to help them. And whatever you say either falls on deaf ears, they're not willing to listen to it, or it comes with a, yeah, but. You kind of give them that advice and they're like, yeah, but, and they continuously make up excuses as to why their problem cannot be solved. Think about how you feel when you've been in that kind of environment. Typically, you don't feel good because you don't feel like you've been able to make a difference. It feels like no matter what you say or do, they just don't seem to be willing to change, or whatever it is they're struggling with just continues to be an issue in their life. Now compare this with somebody who perhaps is really struggling and you're there for them and you listen to them and they say, look, I'd really love your advice on this. And you give your advice or your guidance, you're there for them, you offer your support and they embrace it. They are open to it. They listen to you. They're willing to perhaps act on your guidance or, they thank you for the support that you've given them. That's when it can feel really, really good. So cutting out negative energy from your life doesn't necessarily mean completely cutting out people who are negative. Because often when people are suffering and struggling with something, being around them is actually our opportunity to be of service. And when we're being of service, that can actually dramatically increase our vibration. So just because somebody is negative, us being in their presence isn't necessarily going to decrease our vibration and put us in a negative state. If we feel when we are in their presence, we are helping them. We feel that we are a benefit to their lives. Okay, so it's a really important distinction. And this was something when I realized this, it was a real sort of aha moment for me because I was trying to figure out, how can I be there for the people that need me, protect my energy, but notice when the people that I'm surrounding myself with, they are decreasing my vibration, they're making me feel more negative, and there's nothing I can really do about that. There's nothing I can do to help them, and being around them definitely isn't serving me either. Okay, so a very, very important distinction there. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is your environment in which you spend most of your time. Now, back when I was in a job and I was building up my coaching business on the side, I obviously wanted to come into my business the highest vibe version of me. I wanted to be positive coming into my business. I wanted to be able to feel excited and energized and just really, really positive. However, when you are in a job, especially, when you're spending the majority of your day in a job and in a work environment that is pretty toxic, maybe pretty negative, it can really impact your vibration. And this is, particularly important. Let's say, for example, you are in a position where you're building up a business alongside work, and you come home at the end of the day and you're so depleted that you don't have the motivation or the energy to actually commit to your business. That can become a real problem. Okay? So how do you show up for your job? If that's something you have to do right now, if you need to be in your job financially, if you need that job to support you, how can you show up for that job and maintain a positive vibration so that you still have the energy to come into your business as well? Now, something that I did, and this was a really subtle shift, I changed the language that I was using. Okay, so when we have to engage in something that's negative, so maybe it is going to a job that we don't love and we know that it's a negative workplace and we don't want to be there, we can either tell ourselves, I have to do this. I have to go to work today. And we can, make ourselves feel negative about that experience. Or we can change our language and we can tell ourselves, I get to go to work. Because it's really all about perspective here. Yes, you might not love the job that you're in and you might be desperate to escape that workplace. But telling yourself, I have to do this and complaining about it is only going to make you feel more negative about that experience. So how can you shift your perspective to see that experience or that workplace as something that is a little bit more positive? And we can do this just by changing our language. I get to go to work. It's almost like convincing yourself each morning, like, how lucky am I? I get to go to work. And think about, why is this a positive thing? Rather than just seeing it as this negative place or, negative environment, how can we see this in a more positive way? So for me, it was reminding myself that getting to go to work, this is a blessing. This is an opportunity. Without this job, I wouldn't have the financial means to support myself, and I wouldn't have the financial means to get me started in my business. Think about if I didn't have this job, if I was unemployed. Think about how much fear and panic I would be in because I didn't have an income coming in. Okay, so it was starting to really look for the positives of my job and of work versus always focusing on the negative. Because remember, what we focus on expands. So if you're worried about your negative workplace affecting your vibration, by focusing on the negatives of that workplace, it's much more likely to affect your vibration. Whereas if you change your perspective, if you start to think of your work or your workplace in a more positive and empowering way, it's going to make all of the difference. Now, a little hack that I used to do, and this is really relevant for anybody who has a commute, or even if you know that in your workplace you are surrounded by a lot of negative energy. Maybe, you're surrounded by colleagues that you don't particularly like. Maybe you've got a boss who has, got a pretty low energy, is to put yourself into a protective bubble. Now, this is actually something I would do. I would do it for my morning commute. So, at the time of recording this, we are still in lockdown 3.0 in the UK. So not many people have a commute anymore. But once that returns to normal and people, perhaps you're in a job and you have to actually travel to work, maybe you're in London and you have to get on the tube. So for me, this was my situation. I had to get on the tube in the morning. And if anybody has tried to battle the London Underground at rush hour, you will know what a commotion that is. And that would really just kind of Oh gosh, get me agitated first thing in the morning because you're surrounded by all of these people you don't know. Everybody tends to be in a bad mood. Nobody makes eye contact with each other. Everybody is in such close proximity. It can often be really hot down there. You know, it could be -5 outside, but once you get down on the tube, it's hotter than the sun. So it's a really uncomfortable environment to be in. And then if you add into the mix the fact that you are getting the commute to go to a job that you don't love, it can make you feel a little bit disgruntled. Let's face it, you're not going to be your most high vibe self on, you know, the London Underground at 7 a.m. on a Monday morning. So what can you do about it? Well, something that really helped for me, and this was something I learned actually during my training as a theta healer. So I am a qualified theta healer, and as part of my training for that, that my trainer actually taught me this technique, and it's essentially where you put yourself in a protective bubble. So it's almost like you want to imagine it as an invisible sleeping bag. And this invisible sleeping bag, I see it as this protective shield of bright white light that I zip up around me whenever I need to protect my energy. So as soon as I get on the tube, I would zip up my protective shield. If I was going into a meeting, or, you know, I was meeting up with somebody and I knew that their energy was negative, again, I would zip up my protective shield. And it was almost just to kind of create this kind of bubble around me, this protective bubble of, you know, bright white light, positive energy, which would really protect any negative energy from, you know, impacting my own frequency. Another little hack is by carrying a stone with you, such as black obsidian or tourmaline. These are crystals which you can carry on you, and they are great absorbers of negative energy. So those are some little hacks that you can do on a day-to-day basis. Now, something else I want to discuss, and this might not be relevant to everybody, is to think about, where do you get your energy from? Like, what are the things that actually give you energy versus taking your energy away? We've spoken about being around people, specifically negative people, and how that can affect you, but it doesn't always need to be that it's negative people that drain your energy. You can sometimes be around really positive people, but still feel like your own energetic frequency is being depleted. And so what I really want to discuss here is, you know, whether you are an extrovert or an introvert. Because it tends to be that extroverts, they get their energy from being around people. And it's really funny because I always thought that I was an extrovert, because I'm pretty sociable, I'm quite outgoing, I love, going out and meeting up with people. However, I also really need my alone time. I really need to have that time where I'm alone, where I'm not with anybody, where I can be silent. And I need that to preserve my energy. And I find that if I don't have that, it starts to really lower my vibration. I start to get irritable. I start to feel quite negative. My mood changes. So I really need to protect my energy. I really need to have my time alone. And although I assumed that I was an extrovert, because I like being around people, I realized that I am actually an extroverted introvert. So what I mean by that is that I like being around people, I like being sociable, but I can only do it for a certain amount of time. And the more time that I spend with people, the more my energy becomes depleted. So typically an extrovert will be around people and they'll come away from perhaps social interactions and they'll feel really pumped, they'll feel really energized and really excited, and their energy has been raised. I feel the opposite, and maybe you experience this too, where, you're around people. So let's say, for example, I go for a lunch with a group of girls, a group of friends. I will love being there and I will love that experience, but I will come away from it and I will feel exhausted. Okay, I will feel really, really drained, and I need to have that time on my own. And so it's worth being mindful of, things that can deplete our vibration aren't always on the surface level, aren't always the things that look negative. If you are an introvert, or like myself, an extroverted introvert, being around other people can decrease your energy. And so it's really, really important that you make that space for yourself to be alone. And if you have been around either negative people or you've been in that toxic environment, giving some time for yourself to be alone afterwards is also really, really important. So, practicing self-care. So maybe it's something like having a bath, maybe it's meditating, maybe it's reading a book that really inspires you, or listening to a podcast, doing whatever you can do to raise your frequency afterwards. So if you have been in that negative environment, what can you do afterwards? What are typically the things that you can do that make you feel really good? Maybe it's going out for a walk in nature. It's really important to do those things. Make some space for the things that feel good to help bring your vibration back up again. Now, something else, another little strategy for you to use if you've been around negative people, is to practice a ritual called cord cutting. So when we are with people, what happens is we form this energetic bond with the other person that we are in the presence of. And it doesn't necessarily need to be we're physically in the presence. It might be somebody you have a phone conversation with. It might be somebody you have a Zoom meeting with. Even when we come away from that person, we are still energetically connected to them. You almost want to think of it as a hose pipe connected between you and that other person. And if that other person has a lower vibration than you, they can actually draw off your energy. It's kind of like an energy vampire. They suck away your positive energy, and you can still feel the effects of that even after you've waved goodbye to that person. So maybe you've experienced this before, where you've met up with somebody and they've been going through something and the conversation has been pretty negative. Even when you come away from that person, you can still feel that drain of your energy. You can still feel perhaps quite heavy or quite negative after being in their presence, even once you've said goodbye to them. And it's because of this energetic bond. So to make sure that you cut that bond, you can use this process called cord cutting. Okay, and it's almost like a ritual you want to perform after you've been in contact with somebody negative, where you will close your eyes to do this. I find really helps, and you imagine seeing this hose pipe, this cord that links you and that person. And what I want you to do is I like to imagine it as kind of like on Star Wars, where they have those, what are they called now? Those like light swords. I can't remember what the name is for them now. But basically it's like a sword that is like a big kind of a beam of light in the shape of a sword. What I imagine myself doing is basically just closing my eyes, taking a few deep breaths and taking this sword and just cutting the sword through the cord. Okay, and as I do this, I might say a little mantra to myself, such as, I release myself from this cord. I detach myself from that negative energy, and just imagining myself actually cutting through that cord. So it's almost like this little ritual that you can perform for yourself. Now, one final thing I want to mention, and this is, if you are feeling the effects of a negative environment, so maybe it's your workplace. Let's face it, most corporate settings aren't the most high vibe places. You've got this fluorescent lighting, which, let's face it, nobody really looks good under. And, it can be quite straining on your eyes. And corporate settings, they tend to be quite masculine. They're not often very colourful. They're quite sterile environments. So maybe that's sort of your situation, having to go to this sort of very uninspiring workplace. Or maybe you are perhaps you're working from home, but it's not necessarily the most inspiring, high vibe environment to be in. So this was my situation. Back when I was in a job, going to work wasn't the most inspiring thing to do because, I worked in a corporate space, which was very sterile. But back home wasn't the most high vibe environment either, because I was sharing a flat with, it wasn't a particularly nice flat. I had way too many flatmates, and again, wasn't necessarily a high vibe, positive space. So basically, if you can't change that, if you can't change where you're working right now, it's thinking about what can I do to make this space better. So maybe it's putting fresh flowers on your desk. Maybe it's a few crystals. Maybe it's having either like a scented candle or a diffuser, something that smells really nice. Doing what you can do to make the most of a negative environment. Okay, maybe it's actually listening to empowering music, or listening to a great podcast whilst you're actually doing your work. Anything that you can do to just raise the frequency of the space in which you are in. And that can actually make all of the difference. So I hope these recommendations, I hope they've given you, a little bit of guidance today of what you can do if you're surrounded by that negativity. But reach out to me on Instagram if there's any other topics you would like me to cover. So you can find me at Dani Watson Coaching on Instagram. Come and say hello. Just drop me a DM. Or just let me know on one of my posts if there's anything you would like me to cover for this podcast. But thank you so much for tuning in. And I will catch you on the next episode. Bye, ladies. If you are wanting to build your own successful online coaching business, make sure to check out Freedom, Abundance and Impact, our free 10-day business and mindset course for coaches and aspiring coaches. To access, simply head to wearetheclique.com and click free course in the menu.